Hi, we're going to talk about how to serialize and deserialize user-defined types in this video. First, I'd like to get some terminologies right. So we've been using the word serializing. That means to kind of convert objects in Python objects in memory into JSON strings. So another way to say serializing is also encoding. So we can say we encode objects into JSONs. And the word deserializing can also be referred to as decoding, the opposite of encoding. So decoding JSON into kind of Python objects. So far we've been using Python's built-in JSON library to serialize or deserialize built-in types such as int, string, list, dictionary, to or from JSON. Right? So these types, the JSON library knows how to do natively. However, there are some other built-in types that it doesn't know how to handle, such as complex, and it also definitely doesn't know what to do with the user-defined types. So, and unfortunately, there's not a single standard way of serializing or deserializing these quote-unquote unsupported types. We'll just show one way. Just know that it's one of many possibilities. It gets the job done, but it's not the only way. Before I do that, I'll actually show you what happens when we try to serialize a user-defined type, such as vector, that has two attributes, x and y. So when we run this code, it complains about a type error that the object of the type vector is not JSON serializable. So it just doesn't know what to do with the vector. So in this case, the JSON encoder or serializer really needs help to transform something that it doesn't know anything about, like the vector class, into something that it can actually serialize. And JSON stumS function or method has a default parameter that's designed precisely for that purpose. Let me explain how it works. So now the call to JSON.dumbs, in addition to the object we want to serialize, I'm going to specify the default parameter and I'm going to assign it a function. So this function will be called when the JSON encoder runs into something that it doesn't know how to serialize. So, and this function takes a single parameter. For now, let's just print out what that parameter is. So let's run this, and we see that the O it's a type vector, and what that vector actually is the vector 1, x equal to 1 and y equal to 2. So this is exactly, so what this object is the object that the JSON encoder doesn't know how to serialize. And what the JSON encoder expects this function to do is to return an object that the JSON encoder can serialize. So what kind of information in vector do we want the JSON encoder to serialize? Well, I mean, vector just consists of an x and y attributes, right? Those are the two pieces of the essential information for a vector. So that's what we want to return. So precisely what format or object do we want to return the x and y in? Well, we know x is a number and y is a number. So that really sounds like a key value pair kind of thing, which is a dictionary, right? So we can just construct a dictionary, and the key would be the name of the attribute, and the value would be the value of the attributes. So this kind of dictionary is not difficult to construct by hand, but there is an even easier way, because almost all Python objects has this very special attribute called DunderDict that is a dictionary of all the attributes of that object. So I can show you this in the Python console here. I construct a vector v1 x and x equal to 1, y equal to 2. And if I just do v1 thunder dict, that's the dictionary with the x and y attribute and their values. So that's very convenient. And this works for pretty much all user-defined types, as well as many built-in types. So anyway, with that knowledge, then what we can do here is that we can simply return o dot thunder date. And I'm not going to print this out anymore. So when I run this, then there. Now the JSON.dumbs it's able to serialize a vector because we return a dictionary that consists of all the attributes of the vector, and the JSON .dumbs knows how to serialize a dictionary, and it basically just serializes it into a JSON object. What about going the other way? That given a JSON that can represent a user-defined type such as vector with x and y's, can we deserialize this into a vector object? Now, we can try to do that with JSON.load, which is our JSON deserializer or JSON decoder. Now, when we run this and if we print out the type and what it actually is, that we see, well, it's able to deserialize this, but it deserializes it into a Python dict, which is, perfectly expected because to the JSON encode or decoder, this looks exactly like a dict, right? Okay, so right, so how can we get a vector out of this? Okay, so if it's a dictionary and it already has the attribute and the value for the x and y attributes of a vector, we can do something like this, that we can just instantiate a vector using the x and y keys from the dictionary. So if we do that, this will work. Now it's a vector with the right attributes. So that's an acceptable way, but there is another way, and that is to do something similar to what we did in the encoding process that transforms a user-defined type into a dictionary. So with the help of the default parameter, so we can try to do the same thing for the decoding process in JSON.load. So JSON load s does have a very similar parameter. It's called object hook, and if we pass it a function, then the JSON decoder, in the process of deserialization, it will call this function that we pass as an argument to object hook to give us a chance to kind of customize what kind of object it's the JSON is going to deserialize into. So let's, for now, I do the same thing as I did before, that let's just print out what this O is, so we know what we're dealing with. So let's run it, and the O is basically the dictionary, because here is a dictionary, and it has the key value pairs for x and y's. So the expectation for the object hook function is that it will return an object into which the JSON is decoded. So what we want to do is we want the this to become a vector, so we can just construct a vector, and we know what the x and the y attribute for the vector should be, right? It can come from the value for the x and y key in the dictionary here. So if we do that, and I'm going to run this, now it's going to the reconstructed object is now a vector, and with the correct value for the x and y attributes. Now this approach does have a problem that it always assumes a given dictionary is or represents a vector. So what if it does not? What if we have, say, a dictionary that contains some other information? It does not have the x and y keys. If we just run this as we did before, it will cause a key error because this line of code is trying to find the key x and it's not there. So we really don't want the decoding process to crash in this case. So what we can do is, well, there are multiple ways to deal with it. One is we try to handle the key exception that is raised, right? Now, it's important that if an exception is raised here, if we fail to return a vector object, then we should return the given object as it is, so that JSON actually has something to deserialize. So let's run this now, and we can see that the decoded or deserialized object is just is the default behavior or default type, the date, and it contains the information that is in the JSON string. And it's important to check that we are still able to decode a vector if there is a vector. So let me run this, and yeah, the vector still works, and the JSON string that doesn't have a vector in it also works. So lastly, I'm going to leave you with an exercise that, giving a user-defined type person with the first name, last name, and age, and a list of instances of persons, please try to serialize this list into JSON, and also, given a JSON that represents this list of people, deserialize it and make sure you can reconstruct the original objects in Python. I am not going to show the code here, but have fun doing it. If you run into any trouble or have any questions, please ask in the forum.